On this week's Bet the Process podcast, we have a couple guests, co-guests, co-hosts from Twitter. We have Kanzhiye and Sprotzbettor, and we go through a bunch of different subjects, mostly a meta on Rufus not being around, which is sad, but also makes us happy. So with that, let's start the process. Welcome to another episode of the Bet the Process podcast, what I will call the most special episode ever because there's no Rufus. Although there has been plenty of episodes where there's been no Rufus. But this one, there's actually two guests or two hosts or no hosts. I don't know which one you'd say, but we have a couple of our friends from Twitter on. We have Kanzhiye and Sprotzbettor to talk a little bit about a few different topics that we're going to jump into. So you guys want to give a quick intro on yourselves real quickly, and then I think maybe it would be good to jump into the NBA because obviously that is near and dear to everyone's heart right now. Why don't you go first, Kanzhiye?
Hey everyone, Kanzhiye. I work with Mark. We bet on sports, mostly basketball. Been a big fan of this podcast since like the very beginning. So it's cool to be here.
How about you, Mark?
Yeah, I also bet on sports much like Kanzhiye. I probably started off as a Twitter troll, trolling my way onto this podcast, abusing Rufus on Twitter. Eventually, I think I had lunch with him and I wasn't nearly as rude in person. So
Yeah, it was like good cop, bad cop, because I was simping Rufus in the replies for a long time.
My favorite person that I've ever met that trolled me on was at Sloan this most recent time. I met the Frank Costanza dude, and
Oh wow,
he was just like, first of all, what was so funny about him is he didn't even go to MIT. He makes a big deal about how he went to MIT, and he didn't even go to MIT. And I'm like,
yeah, it was his
and
brother.
he was trying to explain to me why his trolling and how much of a dick he is online is okay. And somehow he didn't convince me of that. And then when I found out he didn't actually go to MIT, I was kind of like, well, this is all. I mean, like you say you went to MIT on when you talk on Twitter, so you have no credibility now to give me any shit. It's not that I give a shit if you went to MIT or not. It's if you say you went to MIT and you purport yourself to be like, like one thing that like I think Diggs, what I like about Diggs is like he's all about sort of authenticity and like shit matters. Like that's like one of those things I think about the lesson from Diggs is that little things matter. You just say something that's wrong, he's gonna latch onto it and be like, that's wrong. It matters that you say that's wrong. And so like the whole sorry guys, I wanted a diatribe, but anyways.
no,
Uh
I think
No, we
I
can talk
think
about
that
Jake.
was fine. I think Diggs, like on that point, like Diggs actually really hated the movie 21 because they changed the race of the main character. So
I mean, who knows? Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. We'll never really
yeah,
know for sure.
yeah.
I mean, the 21 thing is one of those things that like yes, I would probably have the exact same point of view as Diggs did if I wasn't at the center of it, at the mercy of a huge studio, kind of knowing that like if I wasn't complicit in some of the shit, like it wouldn't matter, right? They were still going to make a movie, and it was still going to be a movie that they wanted to make, and it wasn't going to be a biopic of Jeff Ma because there's like three people that want to see that. It was this Hollywoodized movie about card counting, and so again, it's a means to an end, but I think he has told me that he didn't like that movie, so that's
Yeah.
all right. Okay, NBA, let's jump into it. So my take right now, and obviously like the macro theme of the NBA playoffs has been like this Thunder kind of being this juggernaut, all-time best team. And I think like no, all-time great team. I shouldn't say best team, but all-time great team. And from an analytics perspective, I think that's what a lot of people have said. And then even during the regular season, there was this eye test thing, but it took a little while for them to get going. And now that we've seen what they've done in this last round. We're recording this right after they eliminated Minnesota. I mean, it is pretty clear that they are the juggernaut. Is there any chance that the Pacers have against them? what do you guys price that? I mean, assuming it's the Pacers, I guess it still could be the Knicks, but I mean, what would you price that at? And even actually, who do you guys think has a better chance in that, New York or Indiana?
Andy?
Um, I mean, market will probably like the Knicks better than Indiana if they play in the finals, but I don't know. Indiana's just like so weird.
Why
Like
doesn't the market like Indiana? Because obviously, like I was shocked that that line popped. Like what it might the midpoint on that series was what -130, and then it like went up to like -150 or something like that, right?
yeah, I mean, I think everyone's just like waiting for the jump shooting regression that may never come because they just play in such like a different way, I guess. Um, like I don't know. They just like don't really go to the ISO stuff as much. I think in a way that teams feel like they have to. They get good shots, so I don't know. Could just be like a historically good shooting team.
Mark, you have
But
thoughts?
yeah, people don't seem to believe it. So yeah, I don't know.
Weirdly, we don't actually bet sides or futures for NBA yet. We're purely just props. So, like, my level of opinion on how good these teams are is basically just interpreting what other people are betting. So,
Same. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, when you ask like what the fair price is, I was just gonna like, yeah, look at Kalshi and say that. But yeah,
Well, so like
very
on the
conscious.
when we had Kirk on Evans on a few weeks ago, it seemed clear to me that he was indicating that he didn't really believe in the Pacers either. I mean, to the point where when they were up 2-0 on Cleveland, he still felt pretty confident that Cleveland, obviously he didn't think they should be favored, but he thought there was a really good chance that they would still win. And they, to me, from an eye
Well,
test perspective, have looked kind of
that
like a
was more believing in the Cavs than I think
Cleveland, yeah, I think
beating the Pacers. Yeah.
in the
well,
group,
but
based on the group
he also
chats.
said something like he didn't think the Pacers were that good a team. And I think you get an
Hmm.
overwhelming sentiment, and maybe you just said it in a nutshell, which is that they're a jump shooting team, and that the analytics doesn't like that anymore. And and is how Halliburton is like obviously like a very interesting player because a lot of contention about how good he really is. But it's just interesting to me because like I wonder, I just see this like the way they play against the Thunder leading to a lot of turnovers and a lot of Thunder run out. Although, like Halliburton had that game just now where he zero turnovers. So maybe I don't know what I'm talking about. And maybe the way to beat the Thunder is to attack them before they can get into their defense.
Yeah.
No.
Maybe.
Okay.
Yeah. Matchup
Yeah,
stuff is always like interesting. I don't know. It like
yeah,
you think about it for props a little bit, but yeah.
I think it's like it probably would be easy to say things like after this playoffs that matchups matter more than ever, I guess. But it's kind of like it's just a few playoff series, a few results going one way or another. Um, and in the Cavs case, for example, half the team being injured. So yeah, it's hard to look at things and actually treat them as a referendum on anything.
What do you said you guys have been doing a lot of props and the props that you were doing in the playoffs struggled. Give me like a background on that and where you think that there's opportunities to improve next year.
Yeah. I mean, it was good. Like prop stuff was really good during the regular season. It was like just almost purely like model driven, just run model, press button, print money type of thing. And I think it's just like,
What kind of props are they? Just individual player props, scoring
yeah,
props,
yeah, like
everything?
points, rebounds, assists, threes, all the combos for any player really. And yeah, it's just like a lot of bets every day, which is like kind of nice. Like enjoyed that. Like there's alts and all that kind of stuff too. But I think yeah,
Where
there's just
is there a source of alpha in that you're comfortable talking about at all, or is that, I mean, obviously that's a tough one
uh,
because
there is
No,
some alpha, I'm sure, but yeah, I don't really want to unfortunately get into the details there. But yeah, I think just like to sum it up, just like good data science. Like it's not like that I know like a crazy amount about basketball or something. And honestly, I was like barely watching the games. So
Okay, so
data.
when you say good data science, so obviously like I know what good data science looks like in say a place like Twitter, right? A place like Twitter, I led a team that would investigate growth and like how we could grow more. And so we had economists and scientists that would look at like, you know, the behavior of say 300 million users and look for trends, look for, you know, like different ways of analyzing, cutting the data, time series, whatever, and would end up coming up with a hypothesis. And that hypothesis they would then like try to further investigate, and then they would try to model something out, and then based on like a different, you know, product we might want to create or whatever, it would lead to some sort of insight. Is that what you mean by good data science in prop betting? Like, do you look at some macro data, or do you look at some trends, or do you watch some? How do you come up with that hypothesis where you drive some alpha without specifically talking about what
Yeah.
that alpha is?
Yeah. I think it's, well, to like what you said, just try to look at as much data as possible. Like I think basketball is basketball. So like just because it's, you know, more than a few years old doesn't make that data bad. Like there's a lot of good public data. I think just even in the play by play that I think maybe some people aren't fully taking advantage of. Like sometimes I'll see tweets that are like, "Oh, we can't do good analytics work because like the NBA doesn't release like tracking data," or like, "Oh, I wish you know the NBA was like baseball where they have like the MLB savant type of stuff." But I think in reality, it's just like tons of good information in the play by play that is maybe somewhat difficult to like parse out. And then beyond that, like I think Rufus always shits on me for like liking machine learning for some reason. Because one time I like sent him something that had like weird results for a machine learning model, and he's like stayed attached to that for like 5 years now, 6 years. But yeah, just
Rufus never sticks to one thing and doesn't get off it. Yeah.
but like yeah, if you just have a ton of games, have a ton of players, like and you can just create a ton of features, and then it doesn't really make sense to use like some sort of like linear model where you can interpret like the coefficients of every feature, right? Like I don't have to know that this one thing should be positive and this one thing should be negative, right? Like if you just use a model that's like well suited for the problem, I would consider that good data science. And so yeah, you can use whatever like cutting edge stuff. Yeah, as long as you don't overfit and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, just like not being dogmatic about either doing linear models, only things that like make sense, and uh, also not being dogmatic about like let's just have 20,000 features on this data set. So somewhere in the middle, like things still have to make sense. Things still have to be like somewhat adjustable by a human if for some reason we want to. Yeah.
So what in the two areas there that we always talk about with this, right? Obviously you addressed overfitting, and are you saying like from an overfitting perspective, like cutting like limiting your features helps with that, or and then like the other question then is like what about stationarity? Do you worry with a machine learning model that you know that some of the data they're using, like how do you avoid that?
Yeah, stationarity for sure. Like you can like put some constraints on the model too to like make some things only go up over time, or like there's constraints you can put, and then also just I guess testing in like a reasonable way, like never use future data. I think will never really go wrong in that way. And yeah, the league is changing too, so like I don't think stuff necessarily has to be stationary. If that makes sense.
Well, but isn't that like ultimately like the problem, right? If the league is changing from a macro standpoint, I mean, if you think about, I mean, it has like last night's game, I felt like, and these playoff games, it generally felt like prison rules even more. Like the amount that they're allowing and it's great to watch, but I would say it's still like shocking to watch sometimes when these like flops are happening and they're just largely ignoring
Yeah.
them. Um, is
Well, I
that
think that's why
something?
like the modeling approach we had was like a bit iffy for the playoffs, and maybe is like regular season that stuff like doesn't really change, and if it does, like it is picked up in the data, right? Like foul rates will go up or down, and like
Yeah.
if there's some sort of officiating trend, we might not get it on like the first day, but if it's real, then after a couple days, like it'll be in the data. And obviously that kind of stuff is like, yeah, we know playoffs have fewer fouls called, and there's other things that are different about the data. Like, yeah, maybe that's probably what makes the playoff modeling like more challenging.
Okay, so this is a great one, right? Because ultimately, and we were talking over text message a little bit about baseball, and you were also referencing a friend of yours that was a sharp in tennis that was not doing particularly well. Did you guys just are you not betting props in the playoffs right now? Like did the early sample make you stop wanting to do it? Or how do you as a bettor, professional bettor, deal with a situation like this where you're losing and you're just like, this isn't working? Are you stubborn? Do you have hubris? Like how do you deal with that? And how do you move forward? And how are you guys moving forward on betting props in the NBA for this playoffs?
Yeah, we changed a few things. Like one, getting like the bet feedback. Like I don't know, the same teams play, so if you're just like constantly on the same thing, it feels a little off. Props are up for like 2 days, so like that's like a very big difference between regular season where we'd be betting like right when the game starts, basically. Probably shouldn't be doing that for playoffs, and trying to not maybe like respect the market a bit more. Like take some more signal from there.
I think that the difficult part is like our stuff doesn't particularly close that well. Like in the regular season, a little bit it does, but for the most part, like because we're betting so close to close, our expectation is that we're not going to be like, you know, getting incredible amounts of CLV. And if you're losing, usually the comfort is that, you know, you're getting CLV. So in our case, it was kind of like bet, lose, eventually just like started to hold our nose and still bet. And then, yeah, eventually, like last week or so, we've kind of really toned it down as the schedule's thinned out and moved on to some other stuff. But next year, once we have time to dedicate to the problem in a more serious way, I think we should be okay.
So that's interesting though, because like what I'm curious about is you had this like natural. It's like again the philo, and I'm kind of just like talking about the philosophy of a better period, right? Which is like you had this natural like stopping point, which was like games were naturally thinning out anyways, and you had less opportunity or fewer opportunities anyways. So it was easy to stop. I mean, like how do you get to like how do you deal with losing streaks in something like this? Like it sounds like you try to investigate what might be different. You try to think about how the market's different. But what would actually make you like just completely stop betting? Are you going to bet the finals?
We'll bet it a little bit, I think,
Did you reduce your unit size or did you reduce your volume or what
out
did you
of
try to bet
necessity. Yeah,
bigger edges? What?
out of necessity, we reduced our unit size. No, I think like
Or
naturally,
are you
like
betting
particularly
as
when
some version of Kelly or something or
no, we would run into limits before then. Naturally, though, what I would say is like there's just like realistic logistics things when you're betting on things like this with as many partners as we do. If you keep betting stuff where you're not 100% sure it's good with people who are, you know, along for the ride with you on some sort of deal, you know, you don't want those guys to come back next season and like not be as excited to bet your regular season stuff because you had a 2 week of bad sample in the playoffs you kind of weren't as confident in, right? So I think that's like one thing that we definitely considered where, you know, before we were probably not sending the bets off to many different people, but like you have a big whale account with someone, it's probably better just to like not bet with them and just bet on your own accounts internally. Like we have more than enough ways to get on without using those people, and like we'll just start again with them next season. So yeah, it's certainly cut our sizing down quite a bit, I'd say.
Interesting.
Yeah, and maybe also just like I don't know if you just mentioned this, but just like if something's like a little off market, that like gives us a little more confidence now versus like I guess before I didn't really care about price um, as much. Like we just wanted to bet more, but now it's like okay, well if we like this side and this place that we can bet at is like a little bit off market, like it helps. So like yeah, volume less because not everything is also off market that we like. So yeah.
Got it. So, okay, back to the idea of where you find alpha. You had mentioned like getting analytics ideas from watching games. Do you have a good example of something that an idea you've gotten from watching a game?
Yeah, I mean, this like not implemented yet or anything, but just like a ton of zone in the playoffs. And I think, yeah, zone just changes how teams like distribute their shots in a pretty wild way. And like Owen Phillips, he has that newsletter. Like he has like access to some of the tracking data, I guess. And he like posted about, oh, teams just shoot like way more threes when the defense is playing zone. So, yeah, being able to like see that zone is happening and then like having some sort of quantitative feature where you can be like, okay, they're going to play zone 30% of the time, um, instead of just ignoring that exists is probably going to be good. That'd be like one example, I guess.
There's no zone data in the tracking in the play-by-play, right?
There's not, yeah. So you have to like watch and like think about it, yeah.
Is there any information that you would know about zone that's publicly available? Probably not, right?
I think that's kind of the point though, right? Is like, you know, whatever it is you're looking at, you might see something that could be a feature, but you're more likely going to need to go and capture that information yourself in some way,
Right.
whether it's basketball or something else. Like that's, you know, how all of the soccer syndicates have got their edges for years now. It's kind of, I think, where everything else is going to some level. It's like if everyone has the same data, whatever you want to call it, everyone is going to have the same conclusion, right? So that's kind of I think the next evolution of, you know, watching a game. Okay, this thing probably matters. How do we actually get information to track that thing happening?
Well, I mean,
Um,
that's like this classic idea of like, where's the best way to get alpha or a moat? It's like at the beginning, which is to have data nobody else has. But the
yeah,
problem with all of that is it takes a lot of time and investment. To your point, like, I mean, StatsBomb, the company that Ted Knutson started, a lot of that was about creating their own, sport soccer data, right? It was like it's their own event spec. They would have people in Egypt rewatching games with like a script and marking down like what was happening in the game from a whole different perspective than other people would have. Do you think that that would be like if someone handed you, like how about this? I got this one for you guys. Someone tells you guys they're going to pay you whatever millions of dollars a year to do a syndicate, and you'll get a piece of the upside. They're willing to fund it, uh, you know, $100 million or something like that from an operational perspective. Like in other words, you can actually invest in R&D and hire people. What do you guys? What's like the first thing you do to try to like how do you think about this problem? In terms of, again, I've created this really unrealistic, fictitious thing, but it's essentially like someone gives you a bunch of money and tells you to invest in infrastructure to make them a bunch of money betting sports. How do you think about doing that?
Hire
well,
smart.
I'm not going to give you the answer. I'm not going to give you the answer. I mean, I think there's people doing this, right? Like, there's a couple of VCs that are like at the moment looking at trying to raise for that kind of thing. I guess I can talk about that off the call, but like you kind of answered your own question. It's just, you're clearly just going to look at developing your own data sets for different leagues, depending on what you think you can actually bet lots of money on.
Right. That's
Kanzi, I
probably
think,
the first thing you got to think about.
yeah,
Like, where can you actually deploy a lot of capital, legally, or in a way that like is scalable. That there's like definitely a selection as to what you would go after.
I
You
think the legally part of that though is the problem, right? Is like if you look at the world of like, I don't know, liquid markets that you can bet into without going into Asia and all these like weirder places, like there probably just isn't that much money to be made from doing that kind of thing. Like you kind of have to go into the questionable gray areas if you want to make the incredible amounts of money. I mean, like Star Lizard, they might have made in the billions by now, and like a lot of that has come from questionably sourced money in Asia. So I don't know how much of like, let's call it a term there is in just like betting, things that you can bet above board legally in your own name at sports books, right? Like the edge is probably scaling the gray part of it to the absolute max.
So you essentially have to be you can't be self-righteous on what you're betting. You have to be you have to be comfortable with the idea that there's a gray market out there because you just can't get enough money down.
Yeah, I don't
Well,
think
it's,
it'll ever
it's
be
like,
as simple as like
yeah.
openpinnacle.com, click max, right? Like there's definitely ways that are better than that.
Well, like
Um,
SIG already exists, right? So like you're already up against like some level of actual intellectually capable people in those markets. But SIG are not necessarily the same level of active in like, I don't know, second division New Zealand basketball, for example. Like they don't bother with that. But if you can find ways to get money on those things and apply the same principles of like, let's get our own data, like you're just going to be so far ahead. Um,
Yes, and SIG for those people is Susquehanna. It's Jeffrey Yaz's
mm,
group that came out of the options trading world. And I think what his son is now running SIG, which is like a sports betting. What are they? They're mostly in soccer, or what are they? What are they mostly in?
exchange, like in the sort of like, let's call it legal world of like sharp betting, which is like Betfair, let's call it Kalshi, Sport Trade. I think they do some poly market stuff. But yeah, like their equity holders in Kalshi, they'd be most of the market making on the Kalshi event contracts, I would guess. But yeah, they're not betting into FanDuel, I don't think, not directly. So
Yeah.
yeah,
I think the concept of I mean in a lot of ways, right, this is like what Haralabob did in basketball, right? He went back and created, his own team that would get its own data, hired
did or still
obviously.
doing.
I have no idea. I
Yeah,
mean, I don't all I know is he lives on a boat and I see him, I've seen him once every couple of years. He's like Kaiser Soze right now. But like I don't know. I mean, I don't know what he's doing. I mean, I think he made so much money through crypto that I don't know if he's still grinding out edges in sports betting. I mean, that's like the first thing that any retired you know, blackjack player will tell you is to stop grinding out 2% edges and look for real edges, right? If you look at like the stories that have been told most recently about some of the big syndicates, like these guys are not the lottery or the horse racing. Horse racing, you're starting with what, a 20% edge if you're getting rebates, and you just have to build a model that doesn't lose you that much money. So it's like, it's kind of funny because I assume that all three of us believe we're relatively smart, and we're all still thinking about how to grind out these small edges in sports betting when there's probably much larger edges to be grinded out in what some of these syndicates do. So
I don't necessarily think that is entirely true. I think that's like you know,
is that like a myth?
it's not a myth, and I'm not going to disagree with like the Jelcos of the world on like where the money is to be made, but it's more like we're not up against geniuses in sports betting, right? Like, like the people who are actually smart are doing financial stuff. So, like, yeah, we might be grinding for a smaller edge, let's call it that, but it's probably not that hard to get to the absolute endpoint of what's possible. Like, maybe this is hubris talking, but I think Kanzi's pretty capable of getting there at some point. Like, I would say Rufus is pretty close to that too, if he's not already there. Like, there's probably people in financial markets that are making a lot more money than Rufus, but I don't know if there's that many people in racing these days doing that well. Like, those rebate products that people are getting are only getting smaller because more people are betting on sports. So I think the size of the prize kind of just depends on like where the gambling money is actually being made. So like I'm sure you can speak to this, but like blackjack, when you were doing it, for example, and there was a lot of people recreationally playing blackjack. So therefore there was room for you to go and make money playing blackjack. I think like the same principle applies at the moment with sports betting. It's like the last 4 years have just been US sports betting revenues just gone parabolic. So, there's now way more opportunity for people to make money betting in a sharp way. It's just like, yeah, your account's going to get limited. Just get a new account. Yeah, like that's how I think about things. I mean, Kanzi, do you have a different take?
Yeah, no, not really. I think, yeah, I agree with that. Like, just a lot of dumb money, I guess. Just it's exploding in the US. And it's not that we're like trading peer to peer with like just random degens, but like the amount of money like flowing in, it definitely matters. And also, yeah, it's just, it feels like way easier than any sort of like real financial market. Not that I've like participated in those, but just yeah, like the people working on that stuff are just, I don't know, just different level of like
The,
raw
the
intelligence. I think.
I
Yeah,
mean, I think it's a fascinating question because Rufus and I have this conversation privately all the time where I say he could make a lot more money in a different area and he would be great at it because he's like intellectually curious and he, like harps on things when he see like I think he would be good at it.
yeah,
Um,
but would he be intellectually curious about like, I don't know, tariffs or
Yeah.
something? Like I certainly would not be, but
I mean,
yeah.
figuring out what makes Rufus tick is like one of the greatest mysteries of the world. So, I think it's a good point because he is very interested in sports. He's always been. That's how he got into this as a kid. And I mean, I think that's true of all of us. Like there is this notion of caring about the conversation that we're having, around the game and being able to watch it and sweat it in a way. Like I mean, I love a good sweat. Like I still always will. I love to be able to sit and watch a game and sweat it. So it's like that will always fuel me. But I think it is fascinating what you said, because it is obviously an analogy with sports betting, which is like because there's so much dumb money in there, there's this need to have other money, and that's the opportunity for rebates. And if you go into sports betting, right, isn't the dumbest money in sports betting probably in the NFL? Like generally speaking?
I think it would be like to actually answer that question, you would like you just couldn't do it. Like there's plenty of dumb money everywhere from what I've seen. Like UFC, I'd say is probably the dumbest money based off the points bet trading margins that I used to see. Um, but yeah, I mean, like just the rank and file SGP better on the NFL is probably the worst. But at least they have some sort of chance with correlation, whereas like people just betting like 10 leg NBA same game parlays, like you just have no chance. So it's impossible to judge, I would say. And it's I guess less about like where the dumb money. Well, maybe that's wrong. It's not so much about like the dumb money influencing the pricing. It's just like the actual presence of the dumb money.
Yeah, yeah,
Like there just has to
definitely.
be people losing on a product. for you to be able to win substantial amounts of money betting it without getting kicked out immediately.
Yeah. Wouldn't the dumbest money just be like random or drunk person randomly clicking a side on like whatever game is live at like 3 a.m. and it's like minus
Yeah.
120 sides, right? Like
Table
that is
tennis.
expected to lose. That is expected to lose like more than just a dumb NFL fan, right? Because like what they're getting minus 110, maybe even on average better because of synthetic hold or whatever, right? Like that's not going to actually like lose that much. But the people losing by clicking a random button on whatever's on at 3 a.m. is like fueling sports books like having money, I guess. So yeah, it's like the aggregate amount of money, not necessarily like, oh, NFL is pricing is driven by fans or something.
Say that NFL bettors are dumb, Jeff. I can say that if you want me to say that.
No, I mean, I think what I'm getting at is that like obviously NFL is the biggest, most liquid market. It's the like there's almost like this conflict, right, between having these liquid markets which are ultimately become very efficient with having these big markets with a lot of dumb people in them. So it's like I don't have like there's not an answer here. I'm just like thinking through this whole analogy of why sports betting as a market or as an opportunity is becoming more interesting because more people are doing it and therefore more people are losing money. Therefore, theoretically, there's more money to be made because of that. I'm just like reasoning this out in my head and figuring out if that's true.
Yeah, I think the gap there is like the liquid markets of the liquid markets, but everyone else is betting on all these other products that have like pretty limited price. If you're betting on an SGP, like the extent of like sharp SGP bettors that are consistently shaping the price would be like Judah. Now, obviously, everyone has their own. There's a lot of people out there that are betting SGPs that have models, etc. But it's just not the same kind of thing as like an NFL side or an NFL total. And like in the same way that exists, like that's why we picked NBA props is because it goes through. I mean, the pricing is necessarily incredibly efficient, except for the last 5 weeks. But like there's a lot of people betting the NBA. There's a lot of people who are specifically betting NBA props. If you log it into an account and you bet things that otherwise would look like pretty sharp bets, for example, like I guess the way I would explain it is like you can kind of get away with the amount of liquidity because the people looking at your accounts just genuinely believe that there is someone that would be sitting there clicking, I don't know, Rudy Gobert, 10 plus rebounds or whatever it is on any given night. And that's kind of like all you really need as a sharp bettor. Like you can't just log in and start clicking things that just no recreational bettor would ever plausibly actually bet and expect your accounts to last and expect to make money.
Yeah.
Like college basketball extra games. Like
Yeah.
that's like the one that
Yeah.
I don't understand why sports books offer that. If they're like, you know what I mean? It's like the funniest thing. It's like who is really betting, Gardner Webb against and yet, you know, they offer them and people bet them and it's
Yeah.
Does
interesting.
anyone have the data on that? Like, do they net win on extras?
Like does a better or does
I
the
don't know.
books.
Does FanDuel net win on
I mean,
college
I mean,
basketball?
they
they
definitely
probably
do.
take such low volume on them. Like that is like the telltale sign that you're a sharp, right? Is that you're betting on any of that stuff, I would
Yeah.
assume.
I think it's more just about like when you're actually betting it. That would be really the separator. Is like anyone who's betting college basketball extra games outside of the 30 minutes before tip and probably live, like that cohort of customers is just going to be so bad. But yeah, there's definitely enough data. I think, I haven't seen anything for 2 years since I don't work for a sports book anymore. But like, people will literally just click anything that's on site if it's close enough to going off, right? Like that's why these sports books have, you know, I don't know, Japanese women's league basketball. Like it's if it's there, it's 10 minutes to post. Like someone's degenerate enough, they're just going to click it. So I think it's easy to sit here and say like, well, there's no way this is good, but like if it wasn't good, they just delete it. And like I've seen that before from things that I've been betting on, which have subsequently been deleted. So yeah.
All right, let's
Yeah.
move on to a couple other topics. I reached out to you, Mark, because of a comment you made after our last podcast, which was me extolling the virtues of Kalshi. And you made your point like that, obviously that you have some issues with their the virtuous nature of Kalshi, let's say. So what is your objection with them, and educate me as to why I should be less singing the praises of Kalshi?
Well, I don't think there's like anything like fundamentally wrong with them as a business or anything like that. It's just, yeah, I guess like the concept is like there's just nothing new under the sun, particularly in betting, where like, all the things they're talking about that are features of the product that are amazing are kind of all just a function of like, okay, what if we just didn't have to pay tax on this product and could offer it in all 50 states without having to actually, depending on who your lawyer is, abide by the law. So, when they're talking about like offering very low spreads in particular sports, like the reason why they have the ability to offer very low spreads on particular sports is because they don't have to pay the taxes that sports books and the existing exchange products do. The reason why they can actually make money from offering these things is because they can go live in 50 states, whereas the existing exchange products can't. And if you just kind of like escape away all of the actual kind of regulatory friction that exists with these businesses, like, yeah, it's not that hard to run a business with a product like that. So like all of the value they're creating, well, there's two parts I think is like first figuring out the legal loophole to operate, which like all credit to them, no one else has done that. And secondly, I think like one thing that actually is really good about them is like being able to get the customers off Robinhood. Like that's just incredible. Like no one has that either. But yeah, it's just hard like listening to that and like the way they're talking about prediction markets as like necessary for human progress and existence. It's like no, like your customer base is the Robinhood customer base. Like this is just like if we want to be real here, like it's going to be the biggest group of problem gamblers you could probably find out there. So I think that also extends beyond Kalshi too. Like a lot of these exchange products kind of pretend that just because they will serve anyone, they don't have the same responsible gaming issues. But like if you look at there's a couple of studies done in the UK from a couple of years ago where like I think the method of gambling that had the highest rate of problem behavior was exchange betting. So aside from like online casino, that is. So like yeah, I just kind of have a general issue with like if the premise of your business relies on not illegal activity, but like stepping into questionable regulatory waters, like I don't know if you can really claim that the rest of your product is like super innovative or anything like that when there's like clear reasons other businesses are not operating like you do. But yeah, I do think they're going to be successful, and I do think it's probably going to be good for at least a year or two. It's just hard to know what's going to happen with the legal stuff.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Kalshi is very different than like the other exchange type things you're mentioning, like a Novig or Profit, right? In terms of regulatory standing, like Kalshi seems way safer, like insane level of regulatory capture, and
Safer, but like also not completely. Like it just depends on who you ask, really. If you like, I follow various people on. I follow many fine people on both sides, and
Like just like there are good people on both sides.
yeah,
yeah,
like there's a guy like Daniel Wallach who's like a pretty good follower, who's like every second post is basically like declaring that Tarek is going to be in prison and stuff like that, and
Yeah,
it's
but
like,
he's like
you're going to
Wallach is
prison.
like Wallach is a sports betting lawyer, right? Like so
no, no,
he's
no, I
he's
know.
he's hired to say that, right? Like he has clients that are sports books. So
Yeah, like I
I've been
said,
on a panel with him, and I would not take what I don't want to shit on anyone, so I'll
yeah,
stop.
yeah, no, no, I'm not even trying to shit on him. I'm just saying like it
No, you're doing the
entirely
opposite though. You're
depends.
kind of saying like he has some credibility in this, saying that they're
Well, I think it's hard to say either way. That's the point. Is like
yeah.
obviously regulators have some interest in like serving the sports betting lobby, which would be people like Daniel. Like so it's not. It's kind of hard to know. Like, are we going to get to federal sports betting legislation? Are we going to get like an actual runway of Kalshi operating as a prediction market? Like, I mean, obviously it already is, but it's just I don't know where it's going, and if it does end in federal sports betting legislation, like, yeah, me and Candy might be moving to like Curacao or something. So, um, yeah, I don't think it'll be good, but I think like the Kalshi product fundamentally will be quite good.
Yeah, I mean, I think the the concept of Kalshi is not new by any means, right? Prediction markets and event-driven contracts. This is 20 years ago people were doing this stuff, right? It's been around a long time. Um, yeah, I mean, I hadn't thought about the idea of like, and I think you were right for whenever you guys give me shit on Twitter, believe it or not, I do listen to it and I do think about it. And I don't think I fully understood what you were saying until now, which is that we know that there are day traders out there who are probably some of the biggest degenerates in the world. And giving them the opportunity to be day traders around sports is probably a really bad thing. Like it's like giving, meth to a, whatever heroin addict or something. I don't do drugs, so I don't have a good analogy there, so I probably messed that up. But
I think the main thing for that as well is like, we talk about those kind of problems with a FanDuel or a DraftKings as like very clearly ethically being bad. But when you look at, you know, the situations that these exchanges have, not just Kalshi, where their premium market makers are also equity holders in the exchange. And generally speaking, hypothetically, they might have privileged access to certain information or certain um, let me be clear. I have no information regarding that about Kalshi, except for that SIG is an equity holder in some sense. But in the other exchanges, at least, like there is definitely some kind of privileging of market makers that's happening to the point where, do we not care about people having gambling problems just because there's a market maker on the other side of the trade? And particularly in situations where a market maker has some sort of deal where they, are privileged over all of the other users of the exchange, like that seems like just as bad ethically to me as, a FanDuel or a DraftKings, except for the fact that yes, sometimes you will be like kicked off DraftKings and FanDuel for betting in a certain way. But like that's also true for some of these exchanges as well. So yeah, my point is like, why do we not care about like people losing all of their money to market makers versus just like a traditional sports book?
It sounds more intellectual. Market making, quoting.
Yeah,
I don't know. Trading.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I think there's like this notion that I had in that episode where I was like listening to this guy who sounded very intellectual and smart, and to me he sounded like much less evil than Jason Robbins, and so like for some reason like that seemed better to me. But like the point you're making is a really good point ultimately, and so I generally agree with that.
Well, part of it is also. Oh, I mean, just to finish up on this. Like, part of it is like, I think they kind of when they talk about like, oh, there has to be like a real economic reason to offer the market, and they're talking
Yeah.
about like how the GDP of the city goes up if like the finals are there or something. But like, obviously, they don't believe that. That's just what they have to do to like get the market like created and like for it to be like legal and stuff. So like, yeah, no one's actually caring about like the hot dog stands in I don't know, Indianapolis or whatever. Like the hot dog stand people aren't like hedging their future earnings from the
No, it's
finals by
it's
betting
it's
on the
it's
Knicks or
it's
something. Yeah.
it's bullshit. It's bullshit. That part of it's bullshit because again, like that was one that I looked into when I was trying to figure out when we were doing pro trade in 2005, where I was like, how do you actually create economic contracts around this stuff? And it's like, well, it literally says you have to have a legitimate economic hedging risk for this, right? And I was like, I was kind of like, yes, the in Green Bay, the municipality of Green Bay does. Like there are exceptions, right? But it is definitely a stretch to say that. So I agree with that.
I think John T. Porter should have used this argument to get out of his charges. Kind of worked.
All right, guys. I got to run to a meeting. I really appreciate this. This was really fun. We only covered like half of the topics because we actually got into some really good ones. So I appreciate it. Maybe we'll have to do this again sometime when Rufus is back, although the conversation won't flow so easily. So
Yeah. We can just be the permanent subs for when he's out.
all right, guys. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Dad.
Bet the process.